The alarms changed everything. Emergency lights bathed the observation tower in pulsing red as automated systems announced the crisis. Hostile contact detected. Multiple ships entering system perimeter. All training exercises suspended immediately. Commander Zexhia's forearms flew across control interfaces, calling up tactical displays that showed the approaching threat. His scales darkened to combat black as he processed the information. By the void, those are Ravager vessels. 7 heavy cruisers and escort fighters. The training ground erupted into chaos as elite military units abandoned their exercise positions and sprinted toward defensive installations. Krillian warriors chittered urgent commands while Cytherian scouts melted into available cover. Gorvanian heavy troops thundered toward the station's armory, their massive forms shaking the ground with each step. How did they penetrate the outer detection grid? Demanded Scout Leader Valine, her melodic voice sharp with stress. Unknown, replied a Valorian technician, his fingers dancing across holographic controls. All sensor networks show normal operation until 60 seconds ago. They simply appeared. Sarah Chun remained at her position on the small rise, watching the organized panic through her rifle scope. She calmly worked the bolt, ejecting the spent cartridge and chambering a fresh round. Around her, the most advanced military forces in the galaxy prepared for battle with their sophisticated weapon systems. Captain Chun, report to the command bunker immediately, Zexhi ordered. All personnel must reach hardened positions before the enemy closes range. I'll stay here, Commander. Better field of view. That position offers no protection against orbital bombardment. You'll be vaporized in the first salvo. Sarah adjusted her scope's focus, tracking movement in the sky where the first enemy fighters were beginning their descent. Maybe, but someone needs to cover the retreat. The tactical display showed Ravager forces approaching in a perfectly coordinated assault pattern. These weren't random pirates or raiders. This was a professional military operation, designed to capture the training station and its valuable technology. Defensive systems online, reported a Zelthian technician, their crystalline form resonating with barely controlled panic. Plasma barriers activating. Point defense networks ready. Enemy fighters entering atmosphere, called another voice. Estimated time to weapons range, 4 minutes. Zexhi made rapid tactical decisions, his military training overriding the shock of sudden attack. All heavy weapons teams to designated firing positions. Energy shields to maximum power. Prepare for sustained engagement. The alien forces moved with impressive efficiency despite the chaos. Krillian plasma cannons emerged from concealed positions, their energy cores charging with ominous hums. Cytherian arc rifles crackled with electrical discharge as their operators took aim at the descending enemy. Gorvanian kinetic accelerators locked onto targets with computer-assisted precision. First enemy squadron in weapons range, announced the tactical officer. Engage when ready. The sky lit up with the fury of galactic warfare. Plasma bolts streaked upward in brilliant columns of contained starfire. Electrical discharges created a web of lightning between ground and sky. Kinetic rounds launched with thunderous roars, leaving vapor trails in their wake for several minutes. The concentrated firepower of the galaxy's finest military technology held the enemy at bay. Ravager fighters exploded in spectacular fireballs as they met the defensive barrage. The attacking force seemed to stagger under the unexpected resistance. Then the electronic warfare began. Targeting systems compromised, called a panicked technician. Enemy jamming is overwhelming our networks. One by one, the sophisticated weapon systems began experiencing failures. Plasma cannons lost target lock as their guidance computers crashed. Arc rifles fired wild shots as their electrical systems fell victim to coordinated interference. Even the mighty Gorvanian accelerators found their aiming mechanisms corrupted by electronic attack. Switch to manual targeting, ordered Zexhi, but the damage was already done. Weapons designed to rely on computer assistance struggled to function when their technological foundations were stripped away. The Ravager fighters pressed their advantage, diving through the weakened defensive fire to strafe ground positions. Their energy weapons carved smoking trenches across the landscape, while their bombs shattered carefully constructed fortifications. Defensive grid failing, reported the tactical center. Multiple breaches in the perimeter. Enemy ground forces incoming. Through her scope, Sarah watched the largest enemy transport approaching the landing field. It was a massive vessel designed to disgorge assault troops directly into combat zones. Her calculations put it at roughly 1,800 meters. Range, well within her capabilities despite what the alien officers believed. Captain Chin. Withdraw immediately, Zexai's voice carried real urgency now. Your position is completely exposed. Negative, Commander? I have eyes on the primary landing craft. Give me 30 seconds. Your primitive weapon cannot possibly damage a military transport at that range. The armor alone would deflect any kinetic impact. Sarah smiled grimly as she tracked the approaching vessel through her scope. Commander, what's the most vulnerable part of any aircraft? The power core, obviously. But it's protected by the pilot. The transport was following standard assault protocols, approaching in a steep dive that would allow rapid deployment of troops while minimizing exposure time. But the approach angle also positioned the cockpit. Directly facing Sarah's position, she could see the Ravager pilot through the transparent aluminum of the flight deck, a humanoid figure focused entirely on the landing approach. The alien was skilled, maintaining perfect formation while dealing with defensive fire from the ground. Sarah controlled her breathing, settling into the familiar rhythm of precision shooting. Wind was negligible at this distance. The rain had stopped during the alert, eliminating atmospheric distortion. Temperature was stable. All she needed was one clear shot. The transport continued its approach, growing larger in her scope. At 1,500 meters, she could clearly distinguish individual features of the cockpit layout. At 1,200 meters, she could see the pilot's movements as he manipulated flight controls. At exactly 1,000 meters. Sarah squeezed the trigger. The chemical explosion seemed insignificant against the backdrop of galactic warfare raging around them, but the small piece of copper-jacketed lead that emerged from her rifle carried with it something that no weapon could match: absolute reliability. The bullet punched through the transport's forward window, passed through the pilot's helmet, and buried itself in the flight control console beyond. The massive aircraft immediately lost controlled flight, its nose pitching downward as it converted from landing approach to uncontrolled crash. Transport down, Sarah reported calmly. Working the bolt to chamber another round. Engine fire, looks like total loss. The observation tower fell silent except for emergency alarms and the distant sound of the crashing transport. Every alien officer stared at their displays, confirming what their sensors had recorded. Single-shot kill at 1 kilometer, whispered a Krillian weapons expert. Without technological assistance. Without targeting computers. Without energy enhancement. The crash of the transport sent shockwaves through the attacking Ravager force. Their primary assault had depended on that single vessel delivering 200 elite troops directly into the station's defensive perimeter. Without it, their entire tactical plan collapsed. Enemy forces regrouping, reported the tactical center. They're pulling back to reassess. Scout leader Valena's melodic voice carried a note of wonder. How is this possible? Every calculation suggests that shot was beyond physical capability. Sarah was already tracking new targets through her scope. Ma'am, when your technology fails, you fall back on training. When training fails, you fall back on experience. When experience fails, you improvise. But the rifle always works. As if to prove her point, 2 more enemy fighters came into range. Their pilots had learned to avoid the sophisticated defensive weapons by flying evasive patterns that confused computer targeting. But Sarah didn't need computers. The first fighter exploded when her bullet found its fuel system. The second crashed when its pilot simply ceased to exist. 3 shots, 3 kills, she reported. Still have 2 rounds remaining. Commander Zexai's scales had shifted through every color in the Valorian spectrum as he processed what he was witnessing. Captain Chun, with your permission, I would like to revise my earlier assessment of human military technology. No revision necessary, Commander. You were right about everything you said. Our weapons are primitive. They are slow. They have limited range and tiny ammunition capacity. She paused to track another target, a Ravager fighter attempting to strafe the command bunker. The pilot was skilled, using the landscape to mask his approach and timing his attack run to avoid. Defensive fire. Sarah waited until he committed to his attack vector, then put a bullet through his cockpit at 1,400 meters. But they work, she continued, working the bolt with practiced efficiency. When your plasma conduits overload and your targeting computers crash and your power cores fail, our rifles still work. When electronic warfare destroys your communications and jamming blocks your sensors and interference corrupts your guidance systems, our riff? The training ground stretched across 15 square kilometers of carefully designed terrain. Rocky outcroppings provided natural cover while artificial structures created urban combat scenarios. Holographic projectors generated atmospheric distortions and weather patterns from dozens of different worlds. It was the most sophisticated military training facility in the galaxy. Commander HFY stood atop the central observation tower, his forearms manipulating multiple control interfaces simultaneously. Around him, officers from every major species monitored various aspects of the exercise through advanced sensor arrays and real-time tactical displays. Attention. All participants, his voice boomed across the comm system. Today's exercise will test precision, adaptability, and tactical effectiveness under adverse conditions. Each team will engage targets at varying distances while facing electronic countermeasures, environmental hazards, and time constraints. Below, squads of alien warriors took their positions across the training ground. The Krillian unit moved with military precision, their chitinous armor gleaming as they deployed their plasma cannons. Each weapon hummed with contained energy. Ready to unleash destruction at the speed of light, the Cytherian scouts flowed like liquid mercury across the landscape, their arc rifles crackling with electrical discharge. Their silver forms seemed to blur as they utilized their species' natural speed to gain advantageous positions. Gorvanian heavy troops thundered across the terrain, their massive kinetic accelerators leaving deep footprints in their wake. Each step of their power armor sent vibrations through the ground that could be felt even in the observation tower. The Zelthian contingent moved in perfect harmony, their crystalline forms resonating at frequencies that allowed silent communication. Their sonic disruptors remained eerily quiet, but everyone knew the devastating power they contained. At the far end of the training ground, Sarah Chun checked her equipment one final time. Her rifle lay across her lap as she sat in a simple folding chair, apparently unconcerned with finding cover or establishing a firing position. Beside her sat a small wooden case containing her ammunition. "Is the human participant experiencing technical difficulties?" inquired a Valorian observer, his scales shifting to curious yellow. "She appears to be sitting." HFY consulted his displays. "Captain Chin, are you prepared for the exercise to begin?" Sarah's voice came clearly through the comm system. "Ready when you are, Commander." "Very well. First target series will appear at ranges from 5 to 25 kilometers. Weather simulation activating now." Artificial clouds began forming overhead, generated by the facility's atmospheric processors. Within minutes, a steady rain began falling across the training ground, reducing visibility and creating atmospheric distortions that would challenge targeting systems. "Electronic countermeasures active," announced a technician. "All targeting computers and range-finding equipment are now experiencing interference." The alien forces immediately began adjusting their tactics. Krillian warriors activated backup systems while their plasma cannons recalibrated for manual targeting. The Cytherians spread out further, relying on their natural agility to compensate for reduced accuracy. Gorvanian troops switched their kinetic accelerators to area saturation mode. Planning to overwhelm targets through volume of fire, the first targets materialized across the landscape, holographic projections of enemy soldiers in various combat positions. Some took cover behind rocks, others moved between buildings, and several appeared at extreme range where they would test the limits of each weapon system. Engagement authorized. Begin fire when ready. The training ground erupted in controlled chaos. Plasma bolts screamed across the landscape, leaving ionized trails in the rain-soaked air. Electrical discharges from Cytherian weapons created brilliant arcs of lightning that danced between the artificial structures. Kinetic rounds from Gorvanian accelerators struck with thunderous impact, sending clouds of debris into the air. The Zelthian sonic disruptors remained silent to most ears, but their effects were visible as targets simply disintegrated under precisely tuned vibrations. The crystalline warriors coordinated their fire with mathematical precision, each shot calculated for maximum efficiency. For several minutes, the demonstration of galactic firepower continued. Energy readings spiked on monitoring equipment as weapons discharged their deadly payloads. Target after target disappeared under the concentrated assault of advanced military technology. "Impressive results," commented Scout Leader Valen from the observation deck. "The Krillium plasma cannons are maintaining 83% accuracy despite electronic interference. Our sonic disruptors are achieving 91% target elimination," reported the Zelthian coordinator with Harmonic. Pride. The Gorvanian heavy weapons commander rumbled with satisfaction. Kinetic accelerators showing 78% hit ratio. Acceptable performance under adverse conditions. All eyes turned to the tactical display showing Sarah's position. She remained seated, her rifle resting across her knees, apparently watching the other teams engage their targets. "Captain Chun," Zexhaya's voice carried a note of impatience, "your participation window is closing. Do you require assistance with target acquisition?" "No assistance necessary, Commander. I'm observing wind patterns and atmospheric conditions. Give me another moment." This statement drew murmurs from the alien observers. "Wind patterns?" asked a Krillian weapons expert. "What relevance do atmospheric conditions have to modern warfare? Our energy weapons are unaffected by such primitive concerns." Sarah's response was calm. "Everything's connected. Wind direction, humidity, air pressure, temperature gradients. They all matter when physics is your primary guidance system." "Physics?" The Valorian observer's scales rippled with confusion. "Surely your weapon's targeting computer compensates for environmental variables?" "No targeting computer. Just calculations and experience." The observation deck fell silent. Several officers exchanged glances that clearly communicated their thoughts about human, technological limitations. Finally, Sarah stood up. She moved to a small rise that provided an unobstructed view of the training ground. Her movements were deliberate but unhurried, lacking the tactical urgency displayed by the other teams. "Target designation Alpha 7, she called out, referencing a holographic enemy soldier, positioned behind rocky cover at extreme range. The observers consulted their displays. Target Alpha 7 was located 2.3 kilometers away, partially concealed, and moving in an unpredictable pattern designed to challenge even the most sophisticated targeting systems. "Captain," Zexhai said carefully, "that target is beyond your weapon's effective range according to your earlier specifications. Effective range and maximum range are different things." "Commander." Sarah shouldered her rifle, adjusting her position slightly to account for the angle. She controlled her breathing, waiting for the precise moment when all variables aligned. The rain continued falling, creating countless tiny distortions in the air between her position and the target. Through her scope, she could see the holographic soldier moving between cover positions. The projection was designed with sophisticated artificial intelligence, making its movements realistic and unpredictable. She tracked its pattern, noting the timing between position changes. Wind speed was steady at 8 kilometers per hour from the northwest. The rain added moisture to the air, which would affect bullet trajectory. Temperature was dropping as the artificial weather system continued its programmed cycle. She made mental calculations, adjusting her aim point based on decades of training and experience. The alien observers watched through their advanced sensor arrays, tracking her every movement. "Remarkable," commented a Cytherian scout. She's making manual adjustments without any technological assistance. How does she determine range and environmental compensation? Years of practice, Sarah murmured. Her voice barely audible over the rain, she settled into her shooting position, feeling the familiar weight of the rifle against her shoulder. The stock fit perfectly against her cheek, worn smooth by countless hours of training. Her finger found the trigger, applying just enough pressure to take up the slack without firing. The target moved again, exposing itself for a brief moment before darting to new cover. Sarah tracked the movement, predicting where it would appear next. The holographic soldier was programmed to expose itself at irregular intervals, making timing crucial for any successful engagement. She waited. Around the training ground, other teams continued their demonstrations of technological superiority. Energy weapons discharged with devastating effect, their computer-guided accuracy overwhelming multiple targets simultaneously. The sound of destruction echoed across the landscape as advanced weapons systems proved their worth against simulated enemies, but Sarah waited. Is she experiencing equipment malfunction? Asked a Gorvanian observer. Her weapon should have fired by now if she intends to engage the target. Perhaps human neural processing is slower than expected, suggested a Zelthian officer. The calculations required for manual targeting may exceed biological capabilities. Sarah smiled slightly at the comments, never taking her eye from the scope. The target would appear again in approximately 3 seconds based on its programmed pattern. Wind was holding steady. Raindrops. The Galactic Defense Station buzzed with activity as representatives from 12 different species gathered in the main armory. Commander Zexhai of the Valorian Empire stood before a massive display of weapons, his forearms gesturing dramatically as purple scales rippled across his muscular frame. His deep voice echoed through the chamber, drawing attention from every corner. "Behold, fellow warriors," Zexhai announced, "the finest collection of military technology in the known galaxy. Each weapon here represents centuries of advancement and battlefield refinement." The assembled crowd pressed closer. There were the towering Krillian warriors with their chitinous armor gleaming under the station lights. The nimble Cytherian scouts moved with fluid grace, their silver skin reflecting the weapon displays. Even the hulking Gorvanian heavy troops had abandoned their meal to witness this presentation. Captain Sarah Chen stood quietly at the back of the group, her standard Earth military uniform looking plain among the exotic armor and ceremonial dress of her alien counterparts. She watched as Zexhai picked up a sleek energy rifle, its crystalline core glowing with contained plasma. This beauty fires concentrated energy bursts at near light speed. The Valorian commander explained, his mandibles clicking with pride. Range of 50 kilometers in atmosphere, unlimited ammunition through solar charging, and enough power to punch through 3 meters of reinforced titanium. Appreciative murmurs rippled through the crowd. A Krillian general stepped forward, his compound eyes examining the weapon closely. "Impressive craftsmanship, Commander. Our own plasma cannons achieve similar results, though with slightly less range. And what of the Cytherian arc rifles?" called out Scout Leader Valen, her melodic voice carrying a hint of competition. "They may lack the raw power, but their rate of fire is unmatched. 3,000 rounds per minute of pure electrical discharge." More weapons emerged from the display cases. Each species proudly showcased their technological marvels. The Gorvanian representatives unveiled their massive kinetic accelerators, weapons so large they required power armor to operate. The crystalline Zelthians demonstrated their sonic disruptors, capable of liquefying targets through precisely tuned vibrations. For nearly an hour, the demonstration continued. Energy weapons that could level buildings, projectile systems that fired rounds at hypersonic speeds, and exotic armaments that bent the laws of physics. The air filled with technical specifications, battlefield stories, and friendly rivalry between military traditions. Finally, Zexhai's gaze settled on Sarah. His purple scales shifted to a deeper shade, indicating amusement among his people. "And what of Earth's contribution to this gathering? Surely humanity has brought examples of their most advanced weaponry." The chamber fell silent. All eyes turned to Sarah, who remained calm despite the sudden attention. She reached behind her back and withdrew a single item, holding it up for all to see. It was an M24 sniper rifle. The silence stretched for several heartbeats before it was broken by the sound of Krillian chittering. The compound-eyed warriors were laughing, their segmented bodies shaking with mirth. Soon other species joined in. The Cytherians' musical laughter tinkled like silver bells. Even the normally stoic Gorvanians rumbled with deep chuckles. "That," wheezed Scout Leader Valilan, "is your most advanced weapon? It appears to be nothing more than a primitive chemical propulsion device." Zexhai approached Sarah, his forearms spread in what might have been sympathy. "My dear Captain Chun, surely you jest. This appears to be a crude kinetic weapon, barely more advanced than throwing rocks. Does it even have an energy source?" Sarah turned the rifle in her hands, running her fingers along its familiar contours. "No energy source, Commander. Just gravity, chemistry, and physics." This triggered another wave of laughter. A Krillian weapons specialist stepped forward, his expert eye examining the rifle from a distance. "The barrel appears to be a simple metal tube. There's no plasma conditioning, no electromagnetic acceleration, no quantum enhancement. How does it even function?" "Chemical propulsion," Sarah explained calmly. "We call them bullets. Small metal projectiles accelerated by controlled explosions." The Krillian's compound eyes widened in something approaching disbelief. "Chemical explosions? You mean like combustion? The same primitive reaction used for cooking food?" "That's correct." Another Valorian officer joined the conversation, his scales now bright with curiosity. "What is the effective range of this device? Surely it must have some redeeming qualities to warrant inclusion in a gathering of galactic military technology." "Effective range depends on the shooter and conditions," Sarah replied. "In skilled hands, accurate shots have been recorded at distances exceeding 2 miles. 2 miles? The Cytherian scout leader's silver features twisted in confusion. "Our arc rifles are accurate to 50 miles. Your primitive device achieves less than 5% of modern effectiveness." Zexhai picked up his energy rifle again, comparing it to Sarah's weapon. "Captain, with respect to your species, this weapon appears to be several technological eras behind current standards. Our plasma rifles fire at 98% of light speed. How fast do your bullets travel?" Sarah performed a quick calculation in her head. "Approximately 850 meters per second. Give or take, depending on the load." The chamber erupted in fresh laughter. Several Gorvanian heavy troops were slapping their massive hands against their armored thighs, their booming voices echoing off the walls, slower than sound itself. One of them managed between chuckles. "We could outrun their projectiles on foot." "And the ammunition capacity?" inquired a Zelthian officer, their crystalline form resonating with harmonic tones of amusement. "Our sonic disruptors operate continuously for days without reloading." Sarah opened the rifle's magazine, showing the 5 cartridges nestled inside. 5 rounds. Then manual reload? This revelation brought the loudest response yet. Even the disciplined military officers struggled to contain themselves. A Krillian general wiped moisture from his compound eyes with one clawed hand. 5 shots? He gasped. "Our basic sidearms carry 500 energy charges. Some of our heavy weapons fire continuously for weeks." Zexhai attempted to restore some semblance of dignity to the proceedings, though his own scales continued to ripple with barely suppressed mirth. "Captain Chun, while we appreciate humanity's rustic approach to warfare, perhaps your species might benefit from technological exchange programs. Surely even basic energy weapon designs would represent a significant advancement over this relic." Sarah slung the rifle across her shoulder, her expression never changing. "I appreciate the offer, Commander. But we're quite satisfied with our equipment." "Satisfied?" Scout Leader Velin's musical voice climbed in pitch. "How can you be satisfied with weapons that are slower, shorter ranged, and less powerful than anything else in the galaxy? Do humans have no pride in military excellence?" "We take great pride in our military traditions," Sarah answered. Perhaps someday you'll have an opportunity to see them demonstrated. The Valorian commander's scales shifted to a patronizing shade of light purple. Of course, Captain. We would be most interested in observing how humanity adapts ancient weaponry to modern conflicts. It could prove quite ... occasional. More chuckles rippled through the assembled officers. The demonstration officially concluded, but small groups continued to gather around the various displays, comparing notes and sharing stories. Sarah noticed that no one approached her position near the back of the chamber. She overheard fragments of conversation as she prepared to leave. Can you imagine facing modern plasma artillery with those primitive devices? Perhaps we should establish a museum exhibit for pre-technological weaponry. I wonder if they've discovered metallurgy yet. A young Cytherian officer approached her as she headed toward the exit. Captain Chen, I hope you won't take offense at today's reception. We mean no disrespect to your people. It's simply that the gap between your technology and ours is so vast. No offense taken, Lieutenant, Sarah replied. Every species develops at their own pace. Indeed. Perhaps in a few thousand years, humanity will develop energy weapons comparable to our current technology. Evolution takes time. Sarah paused at the chamber's threshold, looking back at the crowd of alien officers still examining their advanced weapons. Lieutenant, may I ask you something? Of course, Captain. In all these demonstrations of advanced weaponry, has anyone mentioned accuracy? The Cytherian silver features showed confusion. Accuracy? Our targeting systems are computer-assisted. Accuracy is assumed. I see. And what about situations where computer assistance isn't available? Why would that ever occur? Our technology is remarkably reliable. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. Technology usually is, until it isn't. She left the chamber, the sounds of continued laughter and conversation fading behind her. In her quarters later that evening, Sarah carefully cleaned and maintained her rifle, a ritual her father had taught her decades earlier. Each component received attention. Every surface was checked and verified. A message arrived on her personal communicator from Admiral Harrison back on Earth. The text was brief. Demonstration successful. Phase 2 authorized. Show them what humanity brings to the galaxy. Sarah set down her cleaning rod and smiled for the first time that day. Tomorrow's joint.